welcome to another episode of the PE Geek podcast, episode number 104. And in today's episode, I'm joined with a very special episode with Mandy Collins, who's actually going to be flipping the equation completely from what we normally do here. And she's going to be interviewing me, and I'll sort of circle to her in a moment to do that. But this sort of came about from an email that she sent, and she's doing an assignment at a university, and she can tell a little bit more about it in a moment. And she reached out and had a few questions for me. And I thought, why don't we just turn this into a podcast? So here we are. Welcome to the show, Mandy.
Thank you, Jarrod. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
It's an absolute pleasure. So you reached out and you had a couple of questions around an assignment that you're doing for your studies. Do you want to give a little bit of context around what's happening?
Sure. I'm a first year at a university in Perth, WA, and I am studying primary school teaching, and I'm majoring in health and phys ed.
Nice.
My last 8 years, I've actually been a fitness instructor and had my own business. And I did get around to some of the schools and worked with the kids. And I just want to further my career by getting into primary school teaching phys ed. And
Nice.
so I have a assignment, and I've been we've got a list of educators that we had to choose from, and one of them was yourself, and I hadn't heard of you until I started looking into you. And then I thought, wow, I love this ICT stuff, so I'm going to just see what this guy's about. And you actually, which I wasn't expecting you to, but so I have a list of questions that I need or would really love you to answer for me, which will make my assignment a lot easier. So one of the first questions is, what have you contributed to for the educational thinking and practices in Australia or around the world? From my findings, I sort of have my ideas, but I'd love to hear that from you.
So it's something that I've, often been asked about, how I've seen things progress and whether I thought that I've had any influence in that. And to be honest, in the very early days of this whole internet thing, I was very much, I felt like putting my neck out there and, being open to all this criticism that was being thrown around about technology and its role in phys ed. And a lot of people would look at me with negative glances and all sorts of different things. But over the years of consistently putting out content and helping people see the benefit of technology in their classroom from not just student perspective and helping them be more efficient, I've really noticed that there has been a change in thinking around about how technology can be used. Now, this isn't to say that, that's all been because of the work that we've done, but we do really go back in time as one of the first people to ever talk about technology in phys ed.
Yeah.
And I like to think that we have created the conversations around how this can be used in meaningful ways. And, that is something that I'm quite proud of. We've obviously worked extensively in training, tens of thousands of teachers every year through the website and our webinars, and helped upskill people so that they can, use stuff more meaningfully. But if you really had to, simmer it all down into what I think we've contributed, it would probably be just helping people have that first conversation about whether it can be valuable for their classroom, and if so, how, and maybe challenging them on the status quo around how they've done something and, is that the most effective use of their time? And how might technology have contributed to that? So starting conversations, and, now there's all these people having these conversations that I feel we were, really having in the early days, and they've sort of flown through, that social media's helped with that. But the website's been a big catalyst, just starting conversations.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it's amazing how far we've come. Was it 2008?
Yeah, 2008. The very first blog post I ever made was like, is anyone reading this thing?
Yeah.
I didn't imagine that anyone would, but over time people did, and it became something that I enjoyed doing, about writing about the stuff that I was doing in my classes, and then eventually traveling around and working with teachers in workshops in Australia and overseas, and making them just think about it as an opportunity. And even if someone didn't go and become a fully fledged integrator, but at least they were starting to reflect on their practice and how best it could work. And we've got so many examples of people who have attended events or done webinars and have just taken one idea, and with that one idea they've gone to a whole new level in whatever that particular thing is. So, but it's the conversation that we triggered that led to that thing, and I think that's our contribution.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I love your contribution, and I can't wait to make use of it when I get out there after a few years of study. So do you think that physical education instructors or teachers have really changed the way that they are teaching nowadays because of the ICT or the computer technology?
They have the opportunity to, that's for sure. So, there is, in saying in general that, the data probably wouldn't back it up, that most people are still teaching very much like they may have been taught themselves. But we now have a whole, group of people who are doing incredibly interesting things and making use of that teaching environment with all of the latest opportunities that are present for them. And I think the biggest mind shift is sort of not necessarily related to technology, but technology has supported it, is that a lot of PE teachers have evolved from experiencing phys ed themselves, where it was just about physical activity and about movement, and that's all, like play these sports, play these activities. But throughout this time when technology has been sort of evolving, PE has been evolving, and it's gone to be, in my mind and through the people that we work with, to become more of an educative experience, where it is seen as a classroom by a growing, ever-growing group of people that think there's learning outcomes there that need to be supported, and there's assessment criteria that we need to match. And it's not just rolling the balls out now and hoping that people are going to enjoy being active forever, but the educative experience is being focused on a bit more so. And I think technology plays a great role in the helping make the classroom educative experience a bit more engaging, a bit more efficient, and helping us do things that we simply couldn't do without it. I think it's a superpower when used appropriately. Unfortunately, superpowers can be used for bad as well.
Yes.
So it's not a magic bullet, but I think that phys ed is evolving to be more educative and more all-encompassing, and hopefully more thought behind it. And technology's played a role in that. And there's still lots of progression to be made, but there are some positive things happening, and technology plays a part in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Things have changed since I've been to school. That's for sure. And,
absolutely. I think of my phys ed experiences, and I can think of a very linear, very simple approach to how phys ed was taught. Like, it was pretty much the same year in, year out. There's a selection of sports, and we just rotate through the sports. And I enjoyed it because I was that way inclined, but there was a massive group of people who didn't. And nowadays there's still a lot of that, but there are other programs that are changing it completely and coming at it from all different angles, and using it as a classroom experience, like giving it the attention it deserves.
Yeah. And Jarrod, with the so there's always a few kids that may not enjoy their physical training or bring their sports gear to the class. Yeah. Of course, we want them to. Mm-hmm. So what sort of thing could you suggest to myself or, say, other PE teachers to help those kids get on track and get them into the classroom? How can we help them with ICT or any means?
Yeah, it's the big question, isn't it? Like, how do you engage people who don't want to be engaged? But one of the most powerful lessons I learned in this in my time when I was on rounds was was related to a group of students who were in year 10, and they were doing the same thing. They weren't engaged. They were coming to class, and my mentor at the time said, how about you go around and find out what they're playing in the schoolyard on their own, on their own merit. And in this particular example, this group of people who were not interested in the curriculum that we were teaching at that time were fully engaged in playing, what was it, Foursquare? Or one of those. So, actually introducing that into the curriculum later on ended up changing their engagement levels. But obviously that doesn't apply to everyone. But the general lesson there is to find the thing that they will have engagement in, and that might mean that not everything that you do applies to all students. Like we think that, let's do this basketball unit and everyone needs to participate in that same thing, but making it more custom and more personal is definitely in the right step to helping people who might not be feeling so inclined about it. What can we do that's going to motivate them personally to be involved, and how can we modify the curriculum to make sure that they're still meeting the outcomes but doing it in a way that matches their interests and their hobbies and their passions. And individualizing the learning, I think, is a powerful motivator. But you're still going to have students who just are simply not interested, and maybe that's a connection that needs to be made with home, opportunities for you to build rapport with them, because a lot of people who teach don't dedicate enough time, I don't think, to building those really important connections with their students. Connection before content is the key word. And, some people skip that completely, and it has huge impacts, for them down the road. But the technology can play a role in helping people as well. You can use that as a mechanism, a hook to engage them through activity. So there's no magic bullet here, but there are strategies that you can use. And I think the biggest one comes down to just being open to, individualize and personalize the teaching to match the students, and not forcing one idea and one way down the whole group. That's when you're going to get a lot of pushback.
Yes. Actually, I listened to one of your podcasts last week about the connection before content.
Mark.
Yes, it was excellent. So, I learned something from every podcast that I listened to of yours. And another question that I had for you, Jarrod, was when I get out and start teaching, what would be the first 2 or 3 things that you would suggest to me as a first year physical education teacher to really focus on and grasp and master, because there are so many skills and along with admin to do and get right. But what are the top?
There is. I literally think that this idea of reflection is pretty critical. It's so cliche to say it. I remember being at university and talking about doing a reflection on all your lessons, and I thought, come on, really just let me teach my lesson. But this ingrained reflective process, I just so happened to never really think about it consciously, but I was always sort of doing it. And then the blog became this truly reflective piece. Now, I'm not saying everyone should create a blog, but I am saying that everyone should have a reflective process that suits them, ingrained into what they do, and sort of really become mindful of it. And, even if you walk out of the class and you think the lesson was fantastic, how can you, sort of reflect on and change that for the future? Because each group that comes in is going to be extremely different. So that reflective thing is critical for me. And the other thing is, it sort of goes hand in hand with this, but not assuming that there's more to learn. There absolutely is. And that's always been the real thing that has annoyed me the most about people who are not interested in utilizing or trying technologies. They'll be like, I'm happy with this. I'm content. I can teach this thing quite well. But it's this this sort of laziness and arrogance from an educator to assume that the learning for them should stop. And, you know, I think it's appalling, because if you had that same attitude from a student that said, you know, listen, that's okay, I don't really feel like trying that or learning that, you know, what would we do? Like, what actually would we do? So, you know, I think if you can reflect on things, if you can be open to learn new stuff, and even if it challenges the core of what you know to be true and how you see yourself as a teacher, I think they're, you know, definitely things for, you know, improving. And then we sort of mentioned the other one, which is, you know, that connection before content. And, you know, it's got to be meaningful for them. And, you know, they need to know that you care about them before they can really start to care about what it is that you're trying to teach them. So there's some pretty, you know, foundational things in there. They probably represent the 80-20 of education. Like, if you had to simmer everything down and like, what are the most meaningful things, you're going to look at stuff like this, like connection, reflection. You know, they're really critical.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And I guess it's a life tool as well, not just in physical education.
Yeah, it's the one of the traits of educators that I really despise, and that is this idea that you know, the learning is stopped for them and they're the font of all knowledge, and, you know, listen to me, sort of, because I'm the teacher. I've never sort of resonated with that, and you know, I'm more than happy to be the learner and actually have students in positions of far greater knowledge than I, and that was something that I would encourage. And, you know, that's always served me quite well. So, yeah, being in the learner seat. Yeah,
great. Jarrod, when I get out in my first year once again, and we'll start the question like that, I know I'm going to make lots of mistakes and I'll learn from those mistakes. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you've made and you've sort of kicked yourself and thought, oh, I could have done it this way or that way? If you could share that with us, that'd be great.
Yeah.
If you want to.
It is, because it is a question I ask everyone who, you know, comes on the show. And, you know, I think the mistakes are where the lessons happen from. And that's so cliche again, but it's the truth. And, you know, I think in the early days of the website and the blog and my use of technology, I was doing things that, like, realistically should never have been attempted. And that was fueling my interests and my learning. I shouldn't dismiss that. But in some cases, I was sort of making something, using tech just for the sake of it. It wasn't actually for a genuine, meaningful reason. And I think in those very early days, I was, you know, very shiny object syndrome driven. If you go back to like posts in 2012 and 2013, it's like I was talking in a foreign language, because I legitimately was. And even now I wouldn't still talk about those things because they were, you know, they were completely out there. But I can't dismiss the learning that came from that. And there's no greater way to realize this than trying to implement something in your classroom and having students say, well, this is ridiculous, or, you know, why don't we just do it like this? And I'm like, you know, that's absolutely true. We could have just done it like this, which I thought, you know, I was, you know, changing the game and changing all the possibilities, but I actually had a far worse learning experience come out of it as a result. So somewhere in there, those mistakes led to me, you know, being very critical around meaningful use of technologies. And I think the biggest mistakes probably were that, you know, in the early days, I was just using stuff to use it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, I guess, yeah, when you're learning about it as well, it's you're not
super excited to show things and do stuff. And sometimes I let that get in the way of the actual goal of what the technology was for. And I do still see this happen with people that we work with. You know, shiny object syndrome can lead the way on decisions that schools make. And they're not making them for the best educational experiences or outcomes or anything other than this is the latest opportunity and let's use it. when they probably could have been best served by staying how they were previously. So yeah, that's probably been a big lesson along the way.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So with your sessions, that I'm not sure how many years you actually were teaching for, what are some of the best sessions that you've actually taken, and why? What attributes of those sessions really stood out for you?
I think the best sessions I've ever taught were always down to this idea of students having obviously a high engagement, fun. You know, a lot of people say fun's not a metric, but that you should base lessons on. But I absolutely think it's really important. We shouldn't underestimate the value of fun. It shouldn't be the only thing that we are looking for, but it should be fun. Yeah. And in these particular lessons, this one I think of, I wrote about on my blog. I called it my perfect volleyball lesson, and it wasn't because I thought it was perfect. It was because it utilized all the elements that I thought a perfect lesson has, which is, you know, you've got some sort of goal that you're trying to meet, and you've got a way to measure that, you know, in your class to know whether you've achieved it. And you've got some sort of reflective process in there at the end to assess it all, so that, you know, that structure is, you know, perfect. The lesson itself had things that I could have changed, but this was a volleyball lesson where deeply ingrained technology use, and, you know, it was centered around personalization and individualized progression through that lesson. So rather than me teaching the volleyball skills to a group of students that are very diverse in their skill set, we were able to teach it in a way that matched with their ability level at that stage in their journey, and then use that data that we were seeing in real time to get rid of activities that I didn't need to teach anymore. Because a lot of people make these assumptions and they go through the motions of teaching, and this lesson, this activity's first, and then I'm going to move into this activity, and I'm going to move into this activity, rather than using the data in real time to say, well, they probably don't need this activity because they've already mastered that. Let's come into this point. So we were able to do that because, you know, we were taking a more personalized approach and a bit more ownership over it. And the way we did it was using mobile devices and QR codes, so that they could scan a QR code and get some personalized instructions and work their way through like a ladder of skills and activities. And the realization that, you know, of this being a lesson that I was quite fond of was that it was not even about me. I was there as a guide almost on the side, working with students individually. I didn't have this huge presence that, you know, most PE teachers have. It was literally the students driving their own path. And, you know, in this particular instance, it worked really well. That's self-directed learning. And, you know, we all sort of culminated together with a finishing game. And we were able to get through a lot more because we were able to cut out things that the students were already able to do, and, you know, made it much more efficient. So that comes to mind. And I've actually done that same lesson for groups of adults before, you know, using the technology and showing them how it works.
Right.
You know, that's been quite common. And then anytime, probably the same thing again, there's a bit of a theme here, but anytime where we've ran CPEP or sports education style units where kids get roles like a coach and umpire and, you know, so on, like those sort of scenarios, I'm quite fond of. So there's probably a theme there, and it's when students are owning the learning, I've enjoyed that.
Yeah, driving it themselves. Yeah, sounds great. Sounds like something that I should aim for, definitely. So, so with that in mind, all those attributes of your session that work really well and create a fantastic activity, game, or end product. You obviously look at that when you take sessions from now and in the future. What other things do you see in the future that are going to be incorporated in your sessions, or you would like to see PE teachers now start to take off with, or start putting in their sessions more so?
You know, I mean, I can't help but look at the world of technologies as an ever-evolving thing that can't be ignored and shouldn't be ignored because it presents a lot of opportunities. And I would say that the biggest trend that we will see across the next 10, 20 years with education is personalization. And that scares people to no end, because the typical classroom is not personalized. It's a generic copy of, what should happen here in this place for these people at this age. And it can be, done quite well, where some people can be helped to be personalized for short groups of time.
Yeah.
But as a whole, it's this very generic sort of educative experience. And I think sort of as we evolve, as technology evolves, we are going to see true personalization of learning, where, people don't need to really, be on a path just because that's the right time of the day when that thing is happening. It could be a true learning experience that's personal, and they come together for grouped activities, and it is something that they carve out, or the technology helps carve it out. So that's what it's sort of like it sounds just like this utopian thing, but all of the technology roadmaps and indicators are pointing towards personalization. And all you got to do is look at the current world now and our own day-to-day existence and how personalized that's becoming. Where you walk into your home and your home can know who you are and what temperature you like the house at. There's already this stuff happening in our day lives. This sort of thing is going to flow into every other aspect of our life. And imagine when students have a truly personalized experience that matches with how much challenge they need. And, we are there to support that as educators. And, I think that's going to be quite exciting. So it's a nice question to wrap up on, I think. My thoughts for into the future.
Great. Thanks, Jarrod. So, back to that connect before content. Yeah. It's personalised. I like it. That's what
I think we will have more important roles in the future than less. A lot of people are challenged by this notion of, well, what if technology is augmenting the learning process so that people, are going through it, all individual paces. What's the teacher doing? Well, they're doing the thing that we should only really be doing, and that is not trying to pass knowledge on to students, but helping them be humans and engaging with one another. And, talking to one another and helping them in group works and situations that, that technology is probably not going to be able to do. But we typically spend most of our time at the front of the room trying to teach things that can be taught much better by other mechanisms. You can't pause a teacher mid-sentence and rewind them, can you? It's because it's going to annoy a student who's already grasped that particular thing. We can do that with other mechanisms. So what is it about what we do that we can't replace, and how can we enhance that so that we get better outcomes for students? And technology is going to make us more potent as educators than less. And the sooner people realize and think about that, the better off we will be in what we do.
And I'm really looking forward to getting out there and educating the kids with ICT in the future. And I really am so glad I've come across you, Jarrod. Thank you so much for having me on today, and I will keep in touch and make sure that I use your app. So
thanks for stopping by and flipping the questions around at me this time.
Well, thank you very much.
All right,
good luck with your work.